I love this. I don't love it because it was obviously a tragic event, but the Bronze Age collapse.
Yeah.
Explain this to me, because when you actually dig a little deeper, it kind of feels like if we do live in this world of potential climate breakdown, a world of 3, 4, then 5, then 6 degrees, if all these climate feedbacks happen, let's not go to 6 because anything with lungs won't be able to breathe. Yeah. Because the planet's, the composition of our air will have changed so much. But it feels like, as a species, we've done something similar in the past, which is the Bronze Age collapse. For people out there right now listening, watching, but also later on when this is on YouTube, explain what the Bronze Age collapse is.
Well, okay, so my take on the Bronze Age collapse is that it was really a collapse for the wealthy, above all, and first of all, and above all, though it ended up affecting more people. So what this is you've got these major Bronze Age empires, Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Hittites in what's now Turkey, these enormous, wealthy, powerful, tyrannical empires. Super interesting. Wonderful archaeological sites nowadays. And then you've got some sort of upstart attempts to do something similar in places like Bronze Age Greece, so Mycenae, the kind of Homeric heroes that's set in this world. And then what happens, so this goes on, these empires last in their kind of final version for a good between about 200 and 500 years, depending on the individual state. And then it all goes wrong at once. They all either completely collapse, all these major empires, or they become much, much smaller and much more isolated. And there's all sorts of theories about exactly why this happens. One possibility, very plausible possibility, is that climate change has a lot to do with it. Another possibility is some version of pirates and bandits. This is sort of popular revolts against these kings and who run pretty exploitative agrarian regimes for their subjects. Another possibility that is just that they depend too much on each other, and this I think is the real lesson for modernity, is that once states depend too much on other states for their basic needs, then you're very vulnerable to something going wrong in that other place, or just to crazy things, to somebody deciding they want to impose tariffs all over the place in a kind of random fashion. You just become very vulnerable if you've sort of outsourced things you need to eat, and so on. So that's what happens, and then there are several centuries really where lifestyles are much simpler. There is less, never none, but less kind of international contact and trade. There's much less writing in that period, and when it comes back, it often comes back in different forms. Lots of evidence for continued storytelling. There's lots of this in Homer. The Homeric manuscripts, the Homeric Greek, contains all these weird bits of really archaic kinds of Greek, when R was a vowel, that kind of thing. And they also contain kind of stories that don't make any sense in the period that they're written, which is the early first millennium BCE. Don't even make sense in the period of these great empires before it, but only really make sense a couple of hundred years earlier again. Kinds of weapons they use, the roofs that they sometimes fall off, and so on. There are these fragments from much older stories. So that to me, that was the way into thinking about this for me, is that these stories survive. So people are talking to each other, they're carrying on, remembering together, but they're no longer supplying enormous tribute and agricultural labor and military labor to these great kings. So for me, it's more of a retrenchment than a collapse for an awful lot of people who lived in the world of Western Asia and the Eastern Mediterranean at the time. But I think if you were, 90% of the people alive in that period probably you know, would have had a better life without those kings than with them. But I think we all, what we see is the picture from the palaces and the account books and that kind of thing, and that's really what disappears. So I'm not sure. So that's to say that I'm not sure how much there really is to learn from it from the society today, because my concern is that when the states of today collapse, they're just going to take us all with them.
Yeah. I mean,
we're not going to get to go to our farms.
There's an optimistic reading, which is that actually elites have the most to gain from the perpetuation of a status quo,
Indeed.
And right now, a lot of the doomerism is, if things go really badly wrong, 2-3 degrees of warming, breakdown of global supply chains, Peter Thiel will be in his bunker in New Zealand, blah, blah, blah. We'll all be missing out, but actually maybe all these multi-billionaires will be the people who are at a comparative disadvantage to where they are today. And
yeah, it'd be nice to think that history would repeat itself in this case.
Possibly not, though.
But I worry that we're too integrated into their worlds
yes.
these days, that we've got all their computers and their tech gear, and that wasn't the case with Bronze Age farmers.
Maybe we'd have less YouTube and more of this. I mean,
yeah. No, this is
seems
great.
kind of all right.
Okay, after the collapse, see you back here.
More literary festivals, William Dalrymple. I'll survive. Did they forget to write? Did the Greeks forget how to write? Was it that bad?
Okay, so most people would say they forgot how to write, or I don't know, poverty made them a bit too stupid or something, and they could no longer write. I think they chose not to write, because the thing is that writing is really dangerous for most people most of the time. Writing is how you get taxed. Writing is how you get counted, how, Herod takes the census, and so on. Most people historically try to avoid the people who write, the university people. And so from my point of view, it's logical, once you no longer have great kings and their stewards who are coming and counting your crops and, counting your laborers and so on, once you've got that world out of the way and nobody's forcing you to write anymore, nobody's forcing their own writing on you, then it's actually safer not to and easier not to. And there's nothing stopping people telling stories and remembering things. And people remember the most incredible things. So I had this very eye-opening trip to Australia a few years ago, just before COVID, and I'm realizing that one of the benefits of a long history almost entirely without writing over a very big region is that there are enormous numbers of oral histories that have been recorded, and you can tell there are these stories that are told all around the coast of Australia up into the 19th century of flooding, of the land disappearing, of new islands appearing, of very similar stories, all the same kind. And what it is this is the flooding at the end of the Ice Age.
Wow.
I mean, these are people remembering 10,000 years.
Wow.
And the stories they told about it. And they're so consistent and detailed and specific, and they match the science of the kind of geology of these areas and so on. And you get a little bit of this in northern Scotland, actually. But some of the stories that were taken down in the 18th century and early 19th century, but particularly in Australia. So for me, that's the power of not having writing, is that you can have this incredible collective memory